Welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Royal Corner. This week in the Royal Corner, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, returns to acting after 8 years in a cameo role entitled Close Friends for Amazon MGM Studios. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, announces that he will be in Toronto, and the dates overlap with the Green-Eyed King in Waiting's Boarfest Earthshot. Earthshot, it should be Earthshot down. Shoot that crap down! We also have this week in the Headley Highlight Show's Royal Corner, Democrats in US Congress ask Andrew Windsor Mountbatten, the dethroned one, to appear over questions relating to his Epstein links. We have King Bitter himself sending a blunt message, allegedly, to Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, the hangers-on, beneficiaries of Mummy and Daddy's disgusting friends and contacts, the talentless pair of indulgent doolittlers, apparently need to stand on their own 2 feet, according to King Bitter, who is modernising after the payout to the family to keep the traps shut about everybody else and go away quietly. We also have the Green-Eyed King looking like a prized prat, attempting to hit a volleyball, knowing full well physical exertion is not his forte. And finally, darlings, there's Boo Boo Kitty Katie, the Doolittle Duchess with little to no friends, appearing on her own as she's barred from other family events at Remembrance Sunday on the 11th of November at the National Memorial Arboretum exercise. I forgot to say I'm going to jump all over a little bit more about the letters patent and what's actually happened with King Bitter and the dethroning, or shall I say the detitling of his brother, the Octopus Hands. Hide your kids, hide your wife, don't have anyone around that's probably got an orifice because he may wish to go there. Man, woman or beast, allegedly. Darlings. I'm also going to chew over a little bit the move of the Green-Eyed King in Waiting and the Duchess of Doolittling moved to Forest Lodge. It happened during half term and the public paid, and they were on holiday before then. And now we're going to have copious stories about decorating their 10th forever home at the public expense, of course. All this and more on the Headley Highlight Show's Royal Corner. Right, let me jump straight in. Before I do anything, this has already taken 3 minutes, so the preamble is going to be far shorter. Thank you for listening, commenting, liking and sharing. Do subscribe. I'm trying to get to 3,000 subscribers. I'm currently at 2,100. I wish to excel forward. Please do make a donation at my website or on my YouTube. I'm very partial to 3 wings and chips and a Miranda or a piece of Bitcoin. Right. So my first story this week in the Royal Corner is Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, is returning to acting. Yes, darlings, she is going to be playing herself in a small cameo in a movie called Close Friends. So after 8 years, she has returned to the screen. She will be playing herself in the Amazon MGM Studios project, which stars Brie Larson, Lily Collins, Jack Quaid and Henry Golding. According to the article in People, other cast members include Melissa Valinor, Dustin Demry-Byrne, Natasha Demetriou, Patty Harrison and Anna Conley. Now, I don't know what the nature of the programming is about. I imagine it's about close friends and presumably they're talking about friendships. But what is interesting to me is that the Duchess has returned to acting and she can just float in between different spaces. That's the mark of someone who's very comfortable, but also very in demand in what spaces they go to. And each week, as you do know, I always have to start my Royal Corner with good news about the Sussexes. So yeah, that's going to be coming up soon, and it will be interesting. And what I thought was really telling was the response of the media to it, the way they discussed the whole thing. Some of the headlines were Meghan Markle. This is an International Business Times. What newspaper or publication is that? Meghan Markle returns after her business flops. Her business hasn't flopped, News International, unlike your publication, which nobody knows. And we know that you paid for the space on MSN because basically it's a shop window. And unless you buy a space in the shop window for your detritus article, nobody's going to read it. News International. Times. But you do have to remember that whenever you're looking at anything in the global north about the Sussexes, it's always going to be negative because of who owns the media and what Harry has been doing with those individuals. Also this week in the Headley Highlight Show's Royal Corner, Harry, the Duke of Sussex, announced that he was going to Toronto because he was going to be spending his Remembrance Day spending time with members of Canada's reserve forces during the Toronto visit. He visited the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada, the Royal Regiment of Canada, and the Navy Reserve in Canada. And the article pitched it as if somehow he needed to organize his schedule so that it didn't take the headlines away from the Yawn Fest, which effectively is the Earth Let's Shoot That Crap Down shot prize exercise. His want-to-be brother, Please Can I Be Just Like Harry, attended. During his visit, he also met with Canadian Armed Forces as well as the True Patriot Love Organisation and the Halo Trust, and their ongoing work to support the family. And let's not forget, his mother was involved with clearing landmines. Also this week in the Headley Highlight Show's Royal Corner, Democrats in US Congress ask Andrew to appear for questioning over his Epstein links. Now, this story that I'm going to bring to you is written by the BBC. And while it's informative, I am going to enter the contendants Mateo Babilo and Aoife Walsh in Washington for this week's early contenders for Sycophants of the Week. I only needed one wah, 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 wah. But I kind of like the sound, so I went for two. So, Mateo Babilo and Aoife Walsh, take a seat from the BBC News. You are the early contenders for Sycophants of the Week. So one of the reasons I wanted to nominate Mateo Babilo and Aoife Walsh for Sycophants of the Week is because of the way they write this article. This article is written in a passive voice so that the phrasing distances Prince Andrew from active responsibility. It's also written in a way that presents the situation as something that's happening to him rather than something he's been a central figure in because of his choices and his associations. And it seeks to diminish his agency in the scandal. The article puts Andrew's framing of his actions at center stage in the article because they include a statement without context. The article seeks to neutralize the allegations and the denials by making reference to those allegations as repeated allegations to neutralize the victim's testimony for the reader. The article also downplays institutional power and reinforces Andrew's position of privilege and the woman of substance, which Virginia Giuffre was. Her memoir is reduced to a recurrent unproven claim, diminishing the power of her personal testimony. And all of this is done with the BBC. And that's why they're Sycophants of the Week. And let me give you all the details now. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, they write, has been asked by Democrats in US Congress to answer questions as part of its investigation into paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. The first clue there is that he has been asked. That's the phrase that distances him from his active responsibility in the situation. It's also using the passive voice. It doesn't use language like he's been accused or he's implicated or he's wanted in questionings in relation to. And if he wasn't royal, they would certainly be using that language. They continue. Members of the Oversight Committee wrote a letter addressed to Royal Lodge, Windsor Great Park, which the former prince has agreed to leave. So now they're making the association with the prince with royalty to give the impression of continuity. The committee doesn't have the power to compel Andrew to appear in front of them, but said it intends to ask questions related to information on Epstein's network and associates based on the pair's long-standing friendship. They should probably send a letter to Princess Beatrice and Eugenie. They may have a few interesting tidbits for the Oversight Committee. Signed by 16 Democrats, the letter asks Andrew to sit for a transcribed interview in front of the Congressional Committee investigating the Epstein case. They continue. The committee is seeking to uncover the identities of Mr. Epstein's co-conspirators and enablers, and to understand the full extent of his criminal operations, the letter read. Well-documented allegations against you, along with your long-standing friendship with Mr. Epstein, indicate that you may possess knowledge of his activities relevant to their investigation. In the interest of justice for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, we request you cooperate with the committee's investigation by sitting for a transcribed interview with the committee. What was also interesting is that the invitation, he's not being sought. Look at the language. An invitation for a transcribed interview. Why is he being invited? He needs to be dragged over there. That's the point. But yet there's this deference, even in the language. You're invited. And listen to the response. Keir Starmer said it is a matter for Andrew to consider personally. There, once again, you have the protection of the establishment by the establishment. The article then goes on to include a statement by the now detitled ex-prince. It doesn't provide any context, of course, and it frames him putting his duty and country before his own personal needs, such as the sycophantry of the BBC and the people who write for it. In quotation marks, I have decided, as I always have, to put my duty to my family and country first, he said at the time, adding that the decision had been taken after a discussion with the king. The article then goes on to mention Virginia Giuffre in the best part of 3 sentences. In a posthumous memoir published in October, Virginia Giuffre, a prominent accuser of Mr. Epstein, repeated the allegations that as a teenager she had sex with Andrew on 3 separate occasions, and Andrew denies the allegations. That last bit there downplays the institutional power of the monarchy. The article spends more time protecting the brand of the Windsors, and it censors its language, and it upholds the BBC's protocol of a cautious tone when discussing scandal around the royal family. And it extends a formality and distance regarding the allegations that no other individual would be afforded, such as he constantly denies it and he's been asked and there's questions around, he's having an invitation. The strategic framing and the displaced adherence to balance, which effectively means that the vast majority of this article featured Andrew's concerns, demonstrates the inherent deference that the BBC has. After all, it is the British Broadcasting Corporation. It's an arm of the establishment, and it's not going to report badly upon members within that establishment unless it absolutely has to. So for the soft frame and the passive language and the strategic framing of Miss Giuffre as a persistent accuser, not a person of authenticity, Matea Babilo and A.F. Walsh, you get Sycophants of the Week. Thank you, darlings, Matea Babilo and A.F. Walsh of BBC News, for your soft framing of a person who really, really needed to have a robust investigation taken place against him. Thank you, darlings. Also this week in the Headley Highlight Show's Royal Corner, I wanted to chew all over this question of the detitling of the octopus brother. Hide your kids, hide your wife, had anything with an orifice, and if it's in his eye line, lock it away. Allegedly, of course, darlings. So I found an article today which spoke directly to the questions of the letters patent. Now, if you remember last week, I did kind of like a deep dive into the questions of the letters patent. And I basically said last week that the whole exercise was smoke and mirrors, unless a number of things happened. For the detitling to have any cogency, the following things needed to occur. 1, there needed to be the letters patent. 2, there needed to be an act of parliament. And the hereditary dukedom could not be removed unless, of course, they were going down the road of the 1970s Act, which was the Deprivation of Titles Act. Well, they must have been listening to me. Because this week, all of the things I said that needed to take place have taken place, so that the detitling is a genuine one, and it wasn't just a exercise in veneer marketing for the letter paper. So what's actually now happened is this, and there's been a slight quirk in it. King Bitter has formally stripped his brother of his HRH titles. So he can no longer use the title Prince that he came with when he was born, and he can no longer use his Duke of York peerage. And the two things that he has used to do that are the letters patent, which was issued on the 3rd of November 2025, removing his HRH title. And I said to you, it needed to be published in the London Gazette, because that is the place for notifications, and it also needs to appear as a public notice. And this also has taken place. So the king has also issued what's called a royal warrant under the King's Sign Manual, directing his name to be removed from the roll of peerage, effectively revoking the dukedom. Now, both of these have been published by the Crown Office section of the Gazette, meaning that they are legally binding and they are now a matter of public record. And that's important, people, because last week when they were talking about, oh, I'm stripping this, I'm stripping that, I said, how about no? Because unless these activities are undertaken, there is no, it's just a facade what you're watching. Now, what's important is this. Is the activities that the king has undertaken sufficient? Because I thought there also had to be an act of parliament so that he would then effectively have them revoked. However, what they've done is they have effectively removed Mr Octopus, had your kids, had your wife, have everybody, yeah? They've removed him from the register of dukedoms. So they didn't need to do an act of parliament. All they did basically was they scrubbed his name off of it. And therefore, because this is part of the royal patronage that the king can actually bestow, I can read the actual text to you. Let me just see if I can find it. Hold on. Sorry, I can't find it. However, a royal warrant under the sign manual is another form of the monarch's prerogative authority, and it's a direct personal instruction from the king, and this is what he's issued in addition to the letters patent. So there's a royal warrant under the sign manual and the letters patent, and those two things mean there don't have to be an act of parliament. They effectively do the same thing. So he spared the parliamentarians the terrible task of having to vote and have his speech read and have all of that stuff read. So in a way, this kind of quietly removes it without it actually going through royal assent. So yes, so under the letters patent, so the letters patent under the Great Seal are fully sufficient and constitutionally valid to revoke his titles. As was the case in 1917 with King George, he restricted HRH titles by letters patent, and then 2012, like I told you last week, Queen Elizabeth extended them to Prince William's children. I told you last week, ordinary peerages could not be revoked unless they went through the Titles Deprivation Act, and they didn't do that because they used the royal warrant under the sign manual, which is another form of monarchical power. So they didn't abolish the 1986 peerage. They basically, like I said, he has been removed from the active register. So he's been suspended and his dukedom has been neutralised. The peerage itself still technically exists. So someone else like the two useless daughters could potentially get it. But it's in abeyance and it's dormant and unclaimed until then or until it's restored. And this approach, like I said, avoids the need for an act of parliament, but it achieves the same outcome. And I thought that was really important to just clarify that, because last week we were not in that space. So what else have I got for you in the royal corner this week? Oh, yes. The Green-Eyed King in Waiting and Boo Boo Doolittle Katie moved into Forest Lodge. So they didn't do anything because they were on holiday. Yes, people, they were on another holiday that the British press didn't want to tell you about because they're so jellified in any kind of way, which, jellified, is that even a word? Basically, yes, they are jellified. They're blancmange, they're jelly, they're mollusks, they are invertebrates, and they don't want to talk about every time they go on holiday because a week or so ago, the Boo Boo Kitty Katie and the Green-Eyed King basically sued a French newspaper because they published pictures of them on another holiday. So now nobody over in this country can mention when they're on holiday, so they can take even more holidays at the public expense. But while they were sunning themselves, they moved into Forest Lodge. And the huge no-go zone, demarcated by a wooden barrier, has completed the move. While the vast majority of the UK and their subjects are finding it hard to heat their homes and even eat this Christmas, they've moved into a £16 million pad. In the same week, we find out that the vast majority of the royals are living for absolutely free in stately homes, which the public pay for. Great move, people! Talk about reading the room. All of the CCTVs, landscaping, security upgrades have been forked out from the public purse. So the generations of hangers-on can live in absolute privacy in 160 acres with no questions asked by the public. Right! Also this week in the Headley Highlight Show's Royal Corner, as we're on Boo Boo Kitty and the Green-Eyed King in Waiting, let's talk about her Miss Billy No Mates. Susie, I've got no friends. I'm going on my own to the memorial service while the rest of the family has an outing without me. So for this Remembrance Sunday, Boo Boo Kitty Katie will be at the Armistice Day on the 11th of November, attending a service of remembrance at the National Memorial Arboretum. Arboretum, if I pronounce that correctly. The event will follow a weekend of Remembrance Day activities by senior royals where they'll only spend about 10 minutes. Smile and continue the pageantry charade for our public entertainment. Boo Boo Kitty Katie and their family are now adjusting to life in their 160-acre home. Must be so difficult. Especially getting £2 million a week. God, you must be living a life of absolute stress, darling! Meanwhile, the Green-Eyed King was looking like a prize prat in Brazil. He was off at the Yawn Fest, known as Earthshot, trying his best to emulate his brother and grab a headline or two, which didn't occur. There were a number of pictures also of him trying to hit the volleyball. And we just can't unsee those, can we? Nobody wants to see that, darling. Oh, dear. I mean, just why? You just try so hard. Just leave it, You're not a volleyball player, and everybody knows that. Everyone knows why you've gone over there. And that's why nobody's interested. And my final story this week, darlings, is about King Bitter. Because now he's had a slight rebrand, allegedly, according to the media scrum. He's now the King of Action, King Thor, the decisive one, despite the fact that it's taken 20 plus years to act in a decisive manner. Hardly decisive, darling. More like dithering, darling. Delaying. Deferring. I can't think of any more words beginning with D. Anyway, King Bitter apparently is sending a blunt message to Princess Beatrice and Eugenie. And quite frankly, in my opinion, they are a part of the York family who have benefited from the disgusting relationships that their parents have. They're a set of talentless individuals, in my opinion. And if their name wasn't York, they wouldn't even be fit to flip burgers in McDonald's. Because you need a test to pass. You need some basic skills for that exercise. And in my opinion, they lack even those. And I've got one final contender this week for Sycophant of the Week. Sophia Papa Mavrodi of MSN News is a late contender this week for Sycophant of the Week. Take a seat, darling. So the reason she gets Sycophant of the Week is not just because she is writing a sycophantic article, but just the title alone. King Charles sends a blunt message. Her opening salvo centers the king. She shows him as a man of action, sending a blunt message. Amid the scandal of his brother, she already seeks to distance him from the whole exercise and the brand of the Windsors. So she gets early Sycophant props for that. Sophie continues. King Charles has made it clear, very decisive language, Sophie, to his nieces, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, they have to stand on their own 2 feet. Really, that's a euphemism in this country. They don't stand on their own 2 feet. They stand on the feet of the nation. That's why everyone's got bunions when they're around. Because they're crushing us to death. Amid a financial overhaul. Following Andrew Mountbatten's latest scandal. What this article actually isn't really saying to you is that the King Bitter paid off his brother copious amounts of money and he didn't cover the children. They only got small amounts of money. And now there's not as much as there was before. That's what that means. And this whole exercise is about the whole York family keeping your trap shut, lovey. Because if they start opening their traps, you just might find that there are other individuals in the family that have rather suspect tastes also. Author Robert Jobson has weighed into the king's effort to make changes that he hopes will keep the monarchy fit for generations to come. So author Robert Johnson has no problem being a peasant all his life, because he wants the monarchy to go on for infinitum. Changes include having non-working members of the firm, such as Eugenie and Beatrice, pay their own way. What does that even mean, Sophia, pay their own way? Pay their own way with what? They don't have jobs. I think one of them works at what does she do? She's a vice president of a software company. Really? How'd she get that job? And the other one, she runs an art gallery. Where does she get the money from that? Was it Jeffrey Epstein? Did he fund that particular project? Like he funded their birthday parties? Apparently, the article then makes reference to the king isn't running a housing association for distant relatives. Didn't he buy Camilla a house somewhere on an estate a year ago, just so that when she could go there, that there was no one there? They are running a housing association, and we pick up the tab because we pay their rent, and they all live for free. Sophia continues. When in the UK, the younger daughter of Andrew Mountbatten lives in Ivy Cottage, which is located within the grounds of Kensington Palace. So basically, she lives in another free house. No context as usual, Sophia, darling. Her sister splits time between Portugal and the UK alongside with her husband, Jack. Broxbank. This article offers absolutely no critical analysis whatsoever. They frame the king as some kind of punisher. Somehow he's acting decisively. These people have been sucking from the nipple of the public for over 60 years. I mean, his mother was in for however long, and she kept the gig going, and now it's his turn, and King, the green-eyed king in waiting, he's next to keep the gig going. So this whole suggestion that somehow, the monarchy's being reformed, we're going to get rid of all of the hangers-on. The only reason they're doing that is because there's a very strong likelihood that within Parliament, I think one of the select committees, is potentially going to look at the finances of the royal family. And now they're trying to organise it a little bit before, because people, they realise just how much the British public is becoming, really disgusted with this institution. It's just there for its own self-aggrandizement, basically. And everyone's cottoning on to that. Oh my God, I've been chatting for nearly half an hour. So that's it, people. It's time for me to go. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this week's Royal Corner. Don't forget to make a donation. Please like and share. Come back next week. And in a couple of weeks, people, I'm going to be having a couple of weeks off because I'm going to take a little break and I'm going to come back even fresher. Thank you for your listening ear, darlings. See you next week. Right. Cut, darlings. Cut. Ta!